Well, g'day everyone. This is the Two Ordinary Cops, and we're back. And today, we're going to talk about the use of lethal force. And Damo, what are your thoughts there, mate?
Yeah, mate. So this is one that the public interest is high in this sort of thing, and it's a very controversial thing. And the reason we're covering it off is because there's been, there's whenever there's a shooting by police anywhere in Australia or around the world, there's always a back and forth. The old Facebook comments always kick on. Why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? So what we're going to talk about today, two things, I think. We're going to talk about the training and the actual justification for that lethal use of force, and to cover off on why police don't do things like shoot people in the leg and all that sort of stuff. But then
Yep.
also, during my time in the job, I had to draw my firearm probably about 10 times. And out of those 10 times I did draw it, I reckon there was one time where I thought, this guy's getting shot. It got very, very close, and that was in Catherine. It was fairly early on. But anyway, what we'll sort of go through, and we'll just sort of back and forth it a bit. But when we were talking about the college, we talked about firearms training and how there was a bit of a joke. We couldn't remember the exact
Yeah,
pieces of
that's right.
legislation. But so section 20, 27, 28, 29 talks about situations where use of force is justified, and then that's 27, and it moves on to 28. So
Yep.
section 28 very specifically states where lethal force, it's force that justified that may cause death or serious harm is justified, basically, and it covers off a whole heap of different things. We don't really need to go into that, but basically, the crux of it is when police respond to it, we're authorised to carry firearms under it's called a Section 4 exemption under the Firearms Act and the NT, and every state's different. Basically, what that means is you're able to carry the firearm, and then if you're justified under either self-defence or the defence of another, you can use force likely to cause death or serious harm where there's a threat to yourself or someone else likely to cause death or serious harm. It's massively misunderstood in community because movies are just absolute rubbish.
Yep.
We do training with, so I'll just touch on training with knives, so edge weapon training. You get in there and everyone says, why didn't they disarm him? This sort of thing. The fact of the matter is, a sharp object requires absolutely no skill to use, and they're very effective at killing people.
Yep.
There's plenty of examples. Geez, you can even look on YouTube and you'll find examples of where someone was perfectly healthy and next minute they're stabbed and then they bleed out and they're dead in 10 seconds. So an edge weapon is something you don't want to get anywhere near. And when we say edge weapon, we mean knife, chainsaw, axe, anything like
Yep.
that. You don't want to get
And
anywhere near it.
no, that's right. Yeah. And knife equals gun. That's what we're
Knife
trained
equals
as.
gun, mate.
Yep.
We're still trying to do that. I mean, as you get more experience, you sort of take on a little bit of calculated risk in that we might use other use of force options like tasers and pepper spray and bloody hell batons and
Yep.
use all sorts of stuff. But at the end of the day, you don't go hands on with a person with a knife. That is Hollywood bullshit. What will happen is the person will stab, slice, dice you. You will be either killed or very seriously injured if you try and take someone on with a knife.
Yep.
I don't care if this is controversial. I've been trained. I've experienced it. The people who are arguing with me haven't generally.
Yeah. That's
So
right.
therefore, you're wrong. I'm right.
Mm.
So
Mate, I'll just cut in
basically,
there. Sorry, mate.
yeah,
Sorry, I was just going to say that, and one of our popular sayings, and I know we've said this before, but we would rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6, and that's what
yeah,
you've got to actually put in your mind when you're arguing about this, or people like having a problem with this. We go to a job expecting to come home to our family, and
that's
and
right.
that's and that's the job. So sorry, mate.
Yeah,
I'll keep going.
no, not at all. And that's saying that judged by 12, carried by 6. That's referring to a jury is 12 people,
Yep.
and pallbearers are 6 people. 6 people carry a
Mm.
coffin. So that's where that terminology comes from. But moving through the justification of it and all that sort of thing, basically, sorry, the second point is, okay, they shot him. Why didn't they shoot him in the leg? The fact of the matter is, when you're shooting, when you are using a firearm, the whole purpose is to cause subject control through immediate incapacitation, is the old saying. So what you're trying to do is cause that person to stop what they're doing immediately. The way to do that, and there's no magic bullet, a taser's pretty good, but if a taser fails, they've still got a lethal use of force on you and you don't have any backup. So that's
Yep.
why if you've got an advancing person, a person can cover a very short distance in a very short space of time. If someone's willing to use lethal force against a police officer, they're highly motivated, and they can run very quickly and they can deliver a lot of very lethal violence towards you in a very short period of time. So you're
Yep.
trained to space it. You're trained to draw the firearm. There's a few, I think it's a UN convention that you must identify yourself as police. So we're trained to say, police, drop the weapon. And that's just, it becomes an instinct. You just go, police, drop the weapon. So the reason that you're trained to shoot, and we shoot centre of scene mass. So that means just basically the area one covers just from the bottom of your neck down to basically the top of your rib cage and across. It's right in the middle of your chest is where you aim. The reason for that is it's the biggest piece of the body that's able to be hit. And everyone goes, oh, but you could take aim. You just need to be trained more, all this sort of thing. You're reacting so quickly that you can barely aim.
Seconds.
You just need to aim at the biggest piece you can see, and you continue firing until the threat stops. So
Yep.
I've dealt, and you would have dealt with people on methamphetamine in particular, especially mentally ill people in psychosis. Extremely motivated. You can't stop them. Pain doesn't hurt. What stops them is a rapid drop in blood pressure and them actually falling over. That's what stops them. So police are trained. We're not all SASR superheroes here. We're just coppers. There's lots of us, and the other thing is the lethal use of force is such a tiny component of the job that you cover off on how to do it, and you just hope that if the situation arises, you've been trained how to defend yourself. There's a little bit of muscle memory there, and you don't think, you just act because you've got no time. So obviously you're justifying what you're doing, but and I know that you can do this fairly quickly. So I'll go into the first time this is the most serious sort of the firearm drawing I had happened fairly early on. I was with my partner in Catherine. I can't remember the year, but I was still in general duties, and this is why it's so weird. It was a day when nothing much happened. It was about 6 o'clock at night. We were 12-hour shifts. We're doing a last lap of town. Anyway, we came through town and there was a fella who we knew well. He's a local drunken bloke, and he's certainly capable of violence, but he's generally pretty good, pretty compliant. He gets locked up quite a bit just for being drunk around town. Anyway, he was sitting down drinking a VB can just very openly in the public, and we just pulled up next to him, and we're sort of parked on the road, and he's about 10 metres away sitting on some grass. Anyway, we walk over, and my partner and I walk over, and we were just going to walk over and, come on, mate, you coming for a sleep? Well, just going to tip the alcohol out and just make an assessment of him. Anyway, we said, come on, mate, you need to we said his name. Come on, you need to tip that out, mate. You know you can't drink in town. Where are you going tonight? What are you doing? Anyway, he basically responded, F you, like he was straight into us. And we're like, no, mate, just calm down. You know us, we're right. Anyway, he pulled out a kitchen knife. And I remember still not thinking anything of it. So I remember, yeah, mate, put the knife down. Like, what are you doing? Don't be stupid. Put the knife away. We'll take you home, or we'll take you for a sleep or whatever else. And then he stood up and he sort of changed his stance, and he pulled the knife in such a way that it was like, what are you doing? And it still hadn't clicked. Like, we had distanced ourselves. Like, we're not standing next to him. We're back about 5 metres or so. And then I remember, it was very early on, but I was a relatively experienced. I wasn't brand spanking new, and we didn't have tasers. And he pulled the knife in such a way, and he started walking very determinedly straight towards me. And anyway, I remember the whole world. The old I've told this story to a few people, but the best way to explain it is, when you slow down a record, he goes, woo, 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 woo. Yep. Everything slowed right down. And I remember drawing my firearm, pointing it at him, and I saw the look in his eye. He was fairly determined. He lifted the knife up and was coming straight at me. I remember having a very clear sight picture of his face, and the gun came up. All of a sudden, my gun was up and it was straight on him. And I remember yelling, police, drop the weapon. And then I lowered my sights to his chest, because I remember thinking, we don't shoot people in the head, centre of mass, squeeze trigger. I had trigger pressure on, so I'd started to squeeze my trigger. And then I watched, you got to remember, this is all happening in an instant. But his demeanour changed, and he stopped, and he threw the knife down, and he put his hands up. And then a weird thing happened. It was like it sped back up. Yep. And then he'd now thrown the knife on the ground, and I had my Glock pointed straight at him. And he's gone, you were going to shoot me. It's like, bloody oath, I was going to shoot you. Get on the ground. And so we got him on the ground. We cuffed him up. And at that stage, it was still fairly controlled. And then I looked to my partner. So in the same instant, like I've looked to my partner, and he's got his gun out as well, and he's then put his gun away, and we've come forward and we've got him handcuffed on the ground. He's now completely compliant. And we got into the back of the cage, and it all sort of happened, and then we stopped. And I remember just stopping and looking at my partner and going, "Mate, I was going to shoot him." He said, "Mate, I was going to shoot him. Like, I thought he was going to
Yep.
stab you." So both of us had drawn our firearm, which means we both had thought we were completely justified. And we would have been, had he kept coming.
Yep.
I would have been justified, but I'm just so thankful it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, recent events, 2019, it's not something you want to put yourself through. And anyway, I remember the adrenaline. I don't know how to explain the adrenaline. It sort of happened so quick. But I remember stopping, and we had him in the cage, and he's sort of talking, and we stopped. And I remember then I started shaking, like my hands started really violently shaking. I said, "Mate, I just need to have a smoke." And then my partner was the same. He was shaking. He's going, "Holy crap, it just went from 0 to 1,000, like instantly." So anyway, I was a smoker back then, so I had a cigarette. Anyway, we get in the car and drive off, and we get to the car, and they're like, "Oh, hey, what do you got?" And we're like, I don't know, assault police, I suppose. What happened? And we explained it. And I remember our shift sergeant's like, "What? You pulled your guns on him?" He's like, "Bloody oath we pulled our guns on him." So why didn't you call for backup? I was like, "Mate, the whole thing lasted about 3 seconds. Like it was, there was no time to do anything." And it, this is no body worn. There was no body worn. There was no nothing. It's years and years ago. And it was like, we had to then convince others of the seriousness, and they just sort of brushed it off like, whatever, he's in, yeah, right, assault police. And I don't think he even went to jail for it. I think we got him for, in the end, I think he pled guilty to armed with an offensive or a controlled weapon, being a knife. So it was a controlled weapon because it's a knife, but it's irrelevant. But so in the end, even the court matter wasn't a very big deal. But I tell you what, it was a bloody big deal to me and my partner, because had he taken another 3 steps, I was going to start putting rounds through him, and that's how close it got. So, I mean, I'll move on. I know that I've spoken to you. You've got.
I've got one, mate. If you,
yeah,
I've got and this is probably a lot more down the track, and we've spoken about it, how how you got the adrenaline there. But this is years down the track. Like this is even when I think at one stage we had a beer where I sit there, I don't get the adrenaline anymore. Like I was a pretty seasoned copper by this stage, and it's funny how you talk about that time slowing. It's like it can be like 2 seconds, but it feels like 5 minutes. And it's so what happened was I was actually on a community, Millingimby, which is out in Arnhem Land, or just off the coast of Arnhem Land. And I got a call. I was out on that island by myself. I used to spend a bit of time out there, and I had a girlfriend at the time out there, which is probably why I spent quite a bit of time out there. But
of course you did.
Yeah. And anyway, I got this call from the store, the local store, and basically this guy had come down. His wife was working in the store, and he'd come down like basically want to fight her. He was drunk somehow. I'm not sure. I can't recall where he got the alcohol from. They probably flew it in and we didn't pick it up. But he so he's tried it, and they've locked down the store. So they called me on my mobile. They always had my mobile, my personal one, because I was friends with them, and they said, "Oh, this is happening." It's all right. So I jumped out of the jumped in the police car, and I was heading down the road towards the store. As I'm heading down there, I see this guy walking up, and I mean, everybody in the community, so it's I just said, "Oh, that's the one." So I stopped and I pulled up next to him, and anyway, I mean, he was fine. There was really nothing out of the ordinary, and I looked at him. I said, "Mate, you're going to come with me. You're drunk. You're going to go for a sleep, right?" And I've gone to grab hold of him. He has jumped back and pulled 2 knives out. I had no idea where he got them from. And then he's run 10 meters away. So he's actually run away from me and then turned around and faced me, waving these knives. And he said, "Are you going to take me on?" And anyway, this is the thing, how we're trained in saying, "Please drop the weapon." And I was I unclipped my Glock because I'm going, "Holy shit, this is pretty serious." So I've unclipped it. So the thoughts that ran through my head were the fact that I've only got 16 shots in this, and then I've got another magazine with 15. There's 1,600 people in this community. If I shoot one, I'm going to need a lot more bullets, because so you're trying to run that through your head going, "Holy shit, if I shoot someone, I'm here by myself. I'm basically a dead man anyway, because the community will come and kill you." And anyway, I've unclipped it, and I've, how you rock it forward before you pull it out? And I've done that, and I've looked at him and I said, you're not going to win this one. So that was my words to him. He fucking dropped the knives and ran, luckily.
Yeah.
But
Oh, thank
it
God, eh?
was, I'm just sitting
Yeah.
there going, hey, and he took off, and I chased him. I chased him in the car, and he went off into the bush, and I, lost track of him and all that sort of thing. But I was like, everything slowed. It's like that took 5 minutes, and even afterwards, I remember sitting there thinking, is that what I said? You're not going to win this one. Like, like it was just, I don't know, and I actually didn't think that I said this, and I'll go into why it was confirmed, because I was also a prosecutor. And
Mm.
realistically, I was a victim in this case. I probably shouldn't have been prosecuting him, but when
Yeah.
you're out bush, that's the way, the lie of the lay of the land.
Mm.
And I remember, like, he actually came into the police station a couple of hours. I had some other coppers flowing in, and by the time they'd actually landed, he'd actually come and handle himself in the police station. Now, this is also a touch on community policing. So if I'd shot him, they would have killed me.
Mm.
But he turned himself in because the community were going to kill him for
Yeah.
actually putting my life in danger. So, I mean, that really is quite touching to me, that the
Mm.
community stood up to me and, stood up for me. And they were really pissed off with him. I was getting
Yeah.
hugs from the elders going, oh, we'd heard you got stabbed and all this sort of thing. And don't worry, we'll go and kill him. Come on, he's up there. So it was actually
Yeah.
safer
No.
him coming in my custody. And then, of course, I prosecuted in court. So he got remanded, flown out, and then he came back out to Ramagini when they had the next court on. And well, I'll give a bit of a shout out to Marty Ost. He was a defence lawyer then. He was an
Oh, yeah.
ex-prosecutor, and he was a defence lawyer, and we always got along really well. We still do. And
Mm.
anyway, he comes up to me and he goes, "Yeah, Schultzy," he goes, he said, "Mate, I was just speaking to old mate, and he's going to plead guilty, of course, but he goes." He said that you said you're not going to win this one. I said, I did say it. I
Yeah.
couldn't remember that I'd actually said that. And
Yeah.
he goes, oh, can I use that? And, when I sum it up, and I said, no, you can't.
Oh,
But,
do what you want. Yeah.
um, but it was like, and I just want to get into the people. Hey, you said time slows,
Yeah.
because it does. It's like, and I still remember every single, millisecond
Yeah.
of that incident. So,
Yeah. It's
and then
funny
there was
how.
no adrenaline. So, I
Oh,
mean, that
so
was a
I
seasoned
think.
cop by then.
Yeah, I think the adrenaline is what causes that to slow. So that
Yeah,
there's that. It may not be an adrenaline panic dump. It's
yeah,
just an adrenaline focus dump. Like you focus and you really switch on. And I mean, we were the one I've just spoken about. We were junior. We weren't. We were a year or two in the job. We've been to plenty of jobs. We're relatively experienced. Yeah, it's all relative. You're very busy straight out of the college, and you're experiencing things immediately. But you're pretty hardened to what goes on in these places until something like that, and you go, "Geez, you've never done that before. Never had to get to that level."
mm,
So I drew my firearm once in the first probably 10 years of the job. That was it. I'd drawn it once. Then when I got to Darwin, and in that City Safe crew that I sort of spoke about in another episode, one of the things we used to do when there wasn't much going on in the pubs and whatnot, we'd respond to not critical incidents, but if there was an armed person or something where you just needed immediate backup. So there was 4 of us in that van. We were all experienced members. We had firearms. We had we had a 12 gauge pump action shotgun and an AR-15 assault rifle in that vehicle, plus our personal Glocks, and we had less lethal options with the taser and plenty of the big party pack pepper sprays. We had one of them each, so we had lots of tactical options. And because we were experienced, we were pretty calm. Like we could attend these matters and sort of de-escalate them. Anyway, we went to there was a change in the culture. There was something that happened in the last 5 years of my job. I found the fact that we would confront these things, and where we'd turned up in the past, being armed was not a new thing. We dealt with plenty of armed offenders, but they kind of just complied. Like you'd turn up and go, "Come on, mate, put the knife down. That's just silly," and they'd throw the knife down. That was it. What
mm,
happened towards the end there? I think it might have been drugs. It may have been. I don't know. I don't know what the cause was, but the younger generation were more willing to sort of not have a go. They didn't attack us because they would have got shot. But what they did was they were a little bit more cheeky, if you like. They would, what are you going to do about it? They'd sort of come at you a little bit with the knife. And we sort of coordinated where we'd splay out in such a way that you'd have someone on a 45-degree angle to them with a taser drawn. We'd have a pepper spray drawn. And I found it my responsibility as the sergeant, if someone's going to use lethal force, I will use the lethal force, because that way I can justify what's going on. So we called it lethal cover. So I'll provide lethal cover. So we're drawing firearms, and quite often not necessarily aiming, but definitely drawn and held at what we call the port. So a low port. So you've got the gun ready to go in your hand. It's sort of pointing at a 45-degree angle. But what you are doing is you're dynamically communicating. Police, drop the weapon now. Nothing will happen. If you comply with us, you'll be safe. Just drop the weapon now. So it's very dynamic. And I think what happens is the reason it would work is because we're always pretty casual. We're on guard, but we're always pretty casual. But when that change happened, when we became very formal, it became that police, drop the weapon, instead of, come on, mate, just chill out, put the knife down. That's where they sensed that change, and they were, oh geez, and they dropped them. I've never had anyone run at me. I know that it happened in other places, and but I don't know. There was no adrenaline in that because it was kind of just a very deliberate response. So we knew, we didn't practice it. Like we talked about it, and with that experience, we didn't really need to practice it. We sort of knew, and we did it that often. We practiced it for real, So I reckon look, 10's just the odd number. I don't know how many times I drew it, but it was quite a few. But I remember there was another time where I definitely did have a sight picture on someone, and that was at the end of a pursuit. It was a very big pursuit with a stolen car with 3 people in the car, 2 of which were known pretty violent offenders, and there was a report of a gun in the car. So TRG, which is the Tactical Response Group, we've spoken about them, or Territory Response Group, we've spoken about them previously. They have a night assessment crew in Darwin that just rolls around on night shift, and they rotate through. There's just 2 of them in an unmarked 200 series Land Cruiser, and they cruise around, and they'll just ghost in the background, and they're there if you need them. And as a shift sergeant, it was always really good to know they're around. We're all in this pursuit, and they've responded. So they've been the primary contact vehicle when we finally spiked the tyres and got this car pulled over. So they had lethal cover, but I was very close to the front as well. So I pulled around, and I had lethal cover as well. So there was 3 of us at the front, and you've got to be really careful. This is where you've got to break your tunnel vision a little bit. You've got to make sure you're not aiming at somebody, and then on the other side of them is a police officer. So a round will go off. It will go and continue on. If you're going to fire around into a vehicle, it'll keep going out the other side potentially. So you've got to watch all that. So that was more of that really controlled response. But the threat here was a firearm. So obviously I just had that cover and I wasn't talking. TRG had the tactical contact, and they're the ones who were giving the dynamic verbal commands, as we call it. And they were very, very controlled, very slow. You, driver, hands hands against the roof, so the palms of his hands against the roof. Do not move, you will be removed from the vehicle. Passenger, do not move. It was all really very formal, very tactical. So I found my sort of role was just to provide a bit of cover to them. But the situation was so tense because they were on drugs, you could tell. We had bloody good information that there was a firearm in the car, and from memory there was. And yeah, it was just a very controlled event. But that was a time where I thought, bloody hell, if he grabs a gun and brings it up, that's the end of this. It's going to happen. And it's funny. You think at the time you sort of just it's pretty I don't know, it's a response. You know what you're doing. It's quite controlled. And it's all resolved and they're in custody, and that's the end of that. But the potential, you sort of look back later and go, bloody hell, we would have shot him.
Yep.
Had he pulled that gun up, we were going to shoot him. I sort of knew.
Yep.
I was even like, I was thinking, right, TRG have got him covered, but if they miss something, if they miss, like, say their focus goes to one of the people, and the focus for me will be on the other person. So I was really thinking like, I'm here to back them up, sort of thing. Yeah. And it was a bit of a night out, that one.
Talking about TRG, mate, and I remember, I can't remember the year, but it was definitely later on in the career, and I wasn't involved in this job, but it was a TRG had actually shot this guy running at him in Darwin, but they'd hit him in the arm because he was running at him with a knife, and all this sort of thing. It was 2014, 15, something like that.
Okay. I remember it.
I do remember it,
yeah.
yeah.
I do remember it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was funny because of course the old experienced people on Facebook, Damo, they
Oh
were very
yes.
good, and they're sitting in there, and anyway, there's a comments on there going, oh, that's excellent police work, like shooting him in the arm and disarming him and all that sort of thing. And I basically
Yeah.
just got in there. I couldn't resist. I said, "Oh, you dickhead!" The fact that the
Yeah.
reason why it hit him in the arm is because, and
He
even though we're
missed.
trained to hit, yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah.
the center of
Yeah.
scene mass. But I said also, what you got to remember is usually your attention gets drawn to where the danger is, and
Yeah.
obviously that's what's happened. He's obviously just raised a gun because he's looking at the knife,
Yeah.
and managed to hit him in the hand. Luckily, because he was at full sprint towards him.
So yeah,
But
what happened there was he fired a number of rounds, and
mm,
I don't know. I don't know the full deal. I'm not going to speak for the guy who did it. I do remember that job. Now that you
yep,
mention it, but and I know the guy who did it. Very good. He's a good fella. The bloke who did it.
yep,
And he hit him in the arm because like the fella was sprinting. Like
yep,
it was just that the round hit him in the arm. It was very very hard to hit a moving target,
yeah,
and especially when it's all happened super quick. Like it's all just going ahead, and he's drawn and fired. I think he fired a number of rounds, and one hit the guy, and he's obviously the old there's a military term called fibs. It's basically flip. I've been shot. FIBS. There's a recognition in the human body that holy bloody hell, I've been shot. So apparently
yep,
this guy's been hit, and just that's it. He sort of gave up because he realised he's actually been shot. And then they went from there. But he lived, that fella. He was fine. But
yep.
yeah, I do remember that job now you mention it. Yeah.
And one thing that we how you're talking about, because a bullet can travel through a person, and so you got to
Mm,
watch for what's behind
yeah.
the target, so to speak. And we're trained religiously in that, and we're trained.
Yeah.
But one thing also to point out, police bullets are slightly different than your normal bullets as
Yeah.
well. They're designed to actually, well, they're designed to kill, because I mean that's if you fire one, that's you're trying to incapacitate the threat,
Yeah.
and we use that word, not kill them. We try to incapacitate
Yeah.
the
It's
threat, and
subject control through immediate
through
incapacitation. Yeah.
incapacitation. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And and so they're actually designed not to travel through the body. Doesn't mean they won't,
No,
but
that's right.
they're actually designed to basically completely incapacitate and not travel further. But like I said, you've still got to watch out, because if you miss them and somebody's
Yeah.
behind them, you can hit them. So
Yeah.
it's a
No, definitely.
so when you look at these sort of instances as well, like you sit there and go, "Oh, it's simple. Somebody's got a knife. They're threatening the police." Well, it's not. You've got to look at all around you and judge the threat. What are the? I can't even remember that. Have they got the means? Is there any other preclusions? You've got to run all this stuff through your mind.
Dime.
That's
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
I remember that. Yeah,
yeah,
the intention, basically the ability,
yep.
the
That's
means.
it.
So
Yep,
they've got to have the opportunity, and
yep. That's
yeah, I
it.
can't remember the other,
Yep,
but there's a
yeah,
number of different things that people will, and basically that assessment is made in an instant. If someone's running
yeah,
at you with a big knife and they're a capable person, then
yep,
you know that all of that's covered immediately. That you're in a
yep,
world of hurt. It's always going to be controversial because the state is taking a person's life. You
yep.
don't want to live in a world where the state can just summarily execute people in the street. It's got nothing to do with
Mm,
that. In my entire time in the police, to get into the police, you go through pretty stringent psychological testing.
yep.
I'm not saying that a few you know, weirdos don't get through, but generally speaking, it will screen out people who are pretty overtly capable of murder. And look, I'm not going to get
Mm,
into that. But in my time, and I've met thousands of police from all jurisdictions in Australia, from New Zealand, from the UK, from the US. We've all got a very similar outlook, and it's not at all one to hurt people. That is
mm,
never the intention. But don't get me wrong, we've also got that attitude where if it has to happen, we will deal with these situations if they have to occur.
yep.
So it's a tricky one. It's look, I am eternally grateful that I never ever had to do the ultimate deed, if you know what I mean. I never ever
Yep.
I was never bloody close, but I was never put in a situation where I did actually take a person's life.
Yep.
That's not the case for a couple of other people I know. And obviously the Zach Rolfe matter from 2019.
Yep.
I didn't have a role in that. I didn't have a role in the in the investigation or the incident or anything like that. But I did go to. Actually, I'll just cover off very, very quickly on my involvement with that. So,
Yep.
obviously, for those playing along, in November 2019, Kumanjai Walker was shot and killed by Constable Zach Rolfe in Yuendamu. Now, the exact details, the matters before the coroner, it's not my place to cover off on that. I was at the time a detective sergeant in Strike Force Trident in Darwin, and I was off duty at home a day or two later after the matter had occurred, and I got a phone call at about 6 o'clock at night from one of my guys. I had a crew who were on duty, and they told me that mate Zach Rolfe is in custody for murder, and I went, no, he's not. I've spoken to guys in Alice. It looks like it's justified. There's no issue, and he sort of corrected me, and he's gone, mate, I'm looking at the bloody custody screen. He's in custody. Offence is murder. He's on investigatory detention for murder. And anyway, I was sort of, oh, geez, what do we do? Anyway, the guys have the bit of a response was, that's it, we're taking our guns off. Like, apparently he'd been stabbed,
Yep.
and then he'd shot the offender. So it's like, well, I'm not wearing a gun. That's it. We're all taking our guns off. If they're going to charge us with murder, we're trained to do this. And I said, I had to play the devil's advocate. I had to go, listen, just calm down. All right. I've worked with major crime. They don't just charge people for no reason. We don't know anything about this. You just do your job. You just go about your business and don't change anything. You don't know anything about this matter. Let's just chill out. Anyway, it wasn't until much later. It has caused a bit of angst with me, that particular matter. I'm not going to go into all the things that the coroner went into, but at the end of the day, a person in very close proximity to a police officer actually stabbed that police officer with an edged weapon and was then shot.
Yep.
You know,
Uh,
it did
yeah, mate.
it did create a lot of angst, and I went within about a week. There was a lot of us sent to Alice Springs just to provide a bit of relief to the station down there. And I went down. I was a sergeant at the time, but I went down as just another body in a vehicle. So I went down
Yep.
and ride around in the cage, and the feeling in there was a feeling of absolutely no support. It was like, you send us out to this society. This society is very, very dangerous. There are edge weapons all the time. The fact that we carry firearms to protect ourselves is, you've taught us how to do it. You gave us the guns. The second we use them, when we're being stabbed, you charge us with murder. And I know that it's an extremely controversial subject. It may be a topic for discussion another time. I'm just talking about the use of lethal force and the training and the response. The feeling was that we've been entrusted by society to attend where no one else wants to attend, to a very dangerous person, potentially with the ability to inflict death or serious harm, and we're trained and armed to deal with that. And
Yep.
when we deal with that, forget the individual police officer. Imagine the stress of the family of the police officer when they're going through, and the confusion of the other members. It's like, well, hang on, I'm not carrying my gun. I'm not going.
Yeah.
This guy's got a knife. I'm not going. Why would
Yep.
Why would I turn up there with my gun to his knife? I'm not putting myself at that risk. And
Yep.
if you applied the work health safety to anybody else, to any other profession, no one on earth would take that on. You would never. It's
No.
like insurance. You just go, you're not insured, don't do it, because if anything goes wrong, you're civilly liable. You just wouldn't do it.
Yep.
But there was an
No, that's
expectation
exactly right.
immediately afterwards that police continue to do it. It was a very, very bad time.
Yep.
To me, it was a massive shift in the way that Northern Territory, and not just Northern Territory, police around the country responded. Just going,
Yeah.
you don't have our back. If this is how it
No.
is, society, deal with that crap yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's
So,
exactly right, mate. I mean, the thing also that I'll just touch on. I mean, look, we will actually go into that at another time. But one
yeah.
of the important things is to remember also that there's still a couple of other things still going through the legal system, I believe, and one of the last things, and this is, I know, like the Brittany Higgins thing, that was completely stuffed up by media talking about it because it influences the
Mm,
public, and not all, and they don't always deal in facts, and that is a massive issue. So that's why we always keep until We basically, until everything's been finalised before you talk about this stuff. But my simple response, and of course, I was living in Brisbane when this happened, and I remember one of my work colleagues turned and goes, "Oh shit, did you hear this?" And basically, I got the rundown of what happened. I said, "Look, at the end of the day, he brought a knife to a gunfight, and
Mm.
that's and that's that
Oh,
might sound
scissors.
harsh, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, an
Yeah.
edged weapon to a gunfight, and
Same
and
result.
and
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, and like I've always said, you go to that shift wanting to come home to your family, and
Yeah.
I mean the fact that this guy was actually stabbed in the process, and then shot him. I mean, I couldn't see too much problem with it myself, but that we'll talk about, we'll go more into depth in that later on, and also people have to understand, and we've spoken about this before. Everybody's judging in hindsight.
Oh, yeah.
That happened within seconds.
Yep.
And everybody's sitting there, they were counting the seconds between his second and third shot, or the first and third shot, or whatever it was. I'm going, like, yeah, oh, okay, all right. And you've said it before. The magistrate has the same amount of time to make a decision. Go,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Exactly
that's
right.
that's how quick 3 seconds goes. So, and yeah,
Yep.
we will go into it, but people need to understand that it's
Mm.
yeah, and the trauma of being under investigation, and especially being charged with murder. I actually don't know how he's still sane, or whether he is.
Yeah. I got no idea.
It's
Yeah.
and you've got to understand these poor cops. And you said there was also a shift in society. There's a lot more shootings, and that's not because the police are trigger happy. It's because
Mm.
people are actually confronting them a lot more. You think of I've been under investigation a number of times, some of them lasting over 6 months, and you don't know, and I know you have as well, Damo.
Yep.
It's basically like your life's in limbo, because and sometimes they make serious allegations. I had a very serious one against me, which was completely unfounded. But the
Mm.
fact that it took over 6 months, and she lied in her statement,
Yep.
um, and it's a big drain, like, because you're always going to work going, and you do get treated as an offender when police get questioned about this sort of stuff. They sit there and take the word of a, well, and I'll call it shitbag.
Mm.
These guys, or women, are not the best people in the world for telling the truth, but then
Mm.
they take their word for it, and they run you over the coals. And it's a lot of stress on police officers.
Yeah. No, mate. It's definitely. Yeah. I think we can probably cover off once the inquest and the findings have come out. We might have a chat about what our 2 cents worth, whatever it is. Obviously, not. We're
Yep,
not going to sit here and pontificate and say what we think about it, but we could probably provide you know, our relatively high level of experience in those sort of
yeah,
situations, and have some level of comment on the inquest findings. Um,
yep.
Once again, we are not a political podcast. We never will be.
No,
Um, it's just these are interesting talking points, and I mean, it's also things I get asked about a lot. A lot of now that I'm out, I've been out 2.5 years. You still talk when you meet people. You talk about your life. Oh, what did you do? I was a copper for 15 years in the Northern Territory. Oh, what did you think of the Zach Rolfe thing? It's like, oh, bloody hell, righto. So
yeah,
it's there.
that's
People want
right.
to talk about it. It's a talking point. Um, I definitely it definitely took the wind out of my sails a little bit. Um, and I won't say
Even I
it's
wasn't
certainly
in the
not.
job, and
Yeah.
yeah, I wasn't even in the job, and I felt deflated. I actually felt
Mm.
really sorry for the cops that are, and there's cops out there right now. We're not in the job, but there's police out there right now doing this job, protecting the
Mm.
community, and and my heart goes out to them, because they're doing it in very tough times.
Yep. Well, look at very recently. I know there's been a number of shootings around the place, but I mean, look at Inspector Amy Scott in Bondi Junction.
Yep,
I mean, she's run into Westfield Shopping Centre because Triple O's gone crazy. So there's a complete craziness of information. You don't know. You've got no idea what you're running into. All you hear
yep,
is armed offender. People are stabbed. There's a lot of blood. There's all kinds of. You're just getting overwhelmed with information. What she did was just run in there as fast as she could. And to the credit of some bystanders, if you watch the footage of her running in there were people running behind her. They were civilians, mate. They're not trained to do anything.
yep,
They were just people who ran to do the right thing. You can see them even pre-planning, grabbing chairs, grabbing weapons of some sort to run to the
yep.
assistance of this very brave. by herself.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
running there.
She a massive shout out, mate.
So she's running there, and I have no idea. I don't know Inspector Amy Scott. I only know
Mm.
her name because it's in the media. What I do
Yep.
know is I've been trained to do the same thing she was trained to do, but there's a difference between being trained how to do something and when it's right happening in front of you and you go and do it. She proved
Yep.
herself. She ran in there and she did what she had to do. Now,
That's right.
I can tell you, I don't know her, like I've just said, but I can guarantee you she's probably never killed anyone before, and
No,
she had no interest in doing it that day, but she had no option. She's run in there, called upon him to drop the knife. He hasn't done it. She's fired her firearm. He's hit the ground, and to her absolute credit, and it shows her humanity and her professionalism, she's gone straight into CPR on the person she just
yep,
shot.
yep,
So
exactly right.
police are
And
trained to do that.
yeah,
Police are trained to do that, and I guarantee that of course, the overwhelming majority of police who do that would do the same thing, go straight into that
definitely.
immediate first aid because the threat is gone. We're now saving life. What is it? Protecting life. So
Preservation of life or protecting life, I think.
preservation of
Yeah.
life. So
Yep.
you've
Yep.
stopped the threat. Now you preserve life.
Yep.
Simple as that.
That's right.
And the fact
Yep.
that
Yep.
he's an
Exactly
offender is
right.
irrelevant. He still has a life, and you still preserve it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
That's
know
exactly
you
right.
see
And
comments. You see comments in Facebook posts by idiots, or yeah, well done, another one gone, and that's ridiculous. That is not what policing's about.
yep.
We're not judge, jury, and executioner.
No.
We're hunters and gatherers. We hunt down criminals and we gather evidence. That's it. Present them
That's
before the
exactly
court.
right. Yep. And look, you've got to also think, and she's a victim as well in the sense that she's now got to live with the fact that she's killed someone.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's a massive drain. And yeah, and no, big shout out to her. I think what she did was absolutely incredible.
Yep.
But I
Especially
also
by
feel sorry
herself.
for her. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep. Oh yeah, I will actually touch off one. I was working with an officer one day. I won't mention who, but I remember turning to me and they said, "Oh," I said, "I don't know if I could shoot someone." And I said, "Well, you're in the wrong profession." And I said,
Yeah.
"Because honestly, if I'm getting threatened with a like an edge weapon and my life's in danger," and I said, "and I draw my Glock and you don't," I said, "I'm going to
Mm.
shoot them, then I'm going to turn around and shoot you. So
Yeah,
get out of the
that's
job."
right. So the thing there is that we're not just shooting a person who's standing there not doing anything. You are
Mm,
using lethal force to protect innocent life. So you're
yep,
stopping a person who's trying to cause death or serious harm to other people. You're not just
yep,
right here. This guy he needs to get shot. Bang. It's nothing like that. It's not Hollywood, and I think there is such a detachment from reality from people when it comes to this sort of thing that we get
mm,
overwhelmed with ridiculous action movies. And don't get me wrong, I don't mind action movies. It's not that. It's just that it's
no,
not real. It's not real life. Um, so the vast majority of people are not in the military. They're not trained to do this sort of thing. They're not exposed to situations where this is justified. They think they have some idea of what they would do in these situations. They have no concept,
no,
and they just have anyway. But that hey, you can have your opinion. It's a free society. Go for your life. But the fact of the matter
yep,
is, those of us who have some idea about this sort of thing think you're an idiot.
yep.
You've got no idea. You've got
Basically,
no idea.
yes.
So,
Yep, yep. That's
yeah,
exactly right. And I think I may have
yeah.
called one or two people idiots in their time when they've decided to put their apparent expert opinion into this
Oh,
stuff.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I don't try to get drawn into that crap. But mate, anyway,
That'll
we're
probably do.
up to
Yeah,
43. Yeah. So yeah,
that'll probably do.
we'll move on to something else, and it's hope this was informative for you, and we'll see you all later.
All the best.